in. We've Good morning, members. There's no fire alarm drill anticipated today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave the building through the nearest fire exit by following the signs above the doors. Make your way to the rear of the car park and wait there until you are told it is safe to return. Please make sure all phones are either muted or switched off. To start the meeting then, good morning everyone and welcome to the Strategic Planning Committee meeting on Friday the 29th of November 2024. This meeting is to consider the items deferred from the meeting on the 22nd of November. I'm your Chair, Councillor Todd Olive. To my right is Vice Chair, Councillor Mike Howe. Supporting officers present are Ed Freeman, Assistant Director, Planning, Strategy and Development Management, Anita Williams, Principal Solicitor, who must be getting used to Strategic Planning Committee by now. Welcome back, Anita. And Wendy Harris, Democratic Services Officer. Can I remind everyone present that this meeting is recorded for publication on the Council's website, so please can members and officers making a contribution to the meeting use a microphone or your comments will not be recorded. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members and declaration of interests.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with yourself, Councillor Olive.
I am here and I have nothing to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
I'm here and nothing to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Jess Bailey.
I'm here, and I want to declare, please, I discussed this with Mr. Hunter at the last meeting in relation to item, I'm not sure what the number is, infrastructure statement. I'm a Devon County councillor. I don't feel I have to make a declaration because we're not actually discussing the merits of the different bids. But as a Devon County councillor, I am aware that Devon County has made at least one bid in relation to Tipton St John's School and possibly others. And I also want to make a declaration, well, just make a reference to the fact in relation to the River Axe Special Area of Conservation, there's reference to Dorset Council, and I will be an employee of Dorset Council. So I don't know whether that needs to be a pecuniary interest, but I haven't had an opportunity yet to put it on my register of interest, but I'm just putting it out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I think that's item 4. Let me just have a look at it. So I don't want to make you say too much on camera. So you're not an employee at the moment, but you will be. Ah, okie dokie. I'll have a look at it and come back to you.
Okay, so carrying on, Councillor Blakey.
Present and no declarations. Thanks, Mandy.
Thank you. Next we have Councillor Fernley.
Present and no declarations.
Thank you. Next we have Councillor Young.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Levine.
Present, no declarations.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Wendy. Agenda item 1 then, apologies. I have councillors Brown, Brian Bailey and Parr on my list. Have we received anything else?
No, we haven't, but I will record the apologies for the rest of the members that aren't here.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure they would have apologised.
They might be in my emails.
Fair enough. Yes, good point. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. We have already done. Should I pause for Councillor Bailey's?
No, I'll just have a look at it and have a quick word with Councillor Bailey. She can then confirm before the item so that we have a declaration at that point.
Okay, thank you. That brings us then to agenda... Oh, no. That brings us then to Councillor Chris Burrup, who just wants to say a few words about a decision that was made last week.
Thank you, Chair. Much appreciated, and I appreciate the Chair's allowing me to speak on this. And I refer members back to the previous agenda item and report on settlement boundaries. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend on Friday the 22nd as I had a funeral to attend, I didn't put forward any formal representation to the committee on Newton Popperford in writing when I found I couldn't attend, because actually I completely agreed with officers' view. So I wasn't expecting committee to come up with something different. I'm therefore grateful for the Chair to allow me to speak on this briefly now, given that the agenda item, given specifically that the agenda action that was agreed was to defer to officers to actually write the boundary. So that is the point that I'm addressing now. There was talk of consistency. I did follow the debate just before going into the funeral on Friday, on the very helpful YouTube channel, so commendable for that, thank you. There was talk of consistency with decisions that had previously been made, which was why the committee was, in essence, looking to reject officers' recommendations. But actually the consistency, in my opinion, needs to be applied to the consistent approach that has been applied in law to where is the centre of Newton Popperford. It is a very linear village. So I have the benefit, and members don't, unfortunately, of having the settlement map in front of me. But if you can cast yourself back and picture Newton Popperford, there was a large black outlined block to the east of eastern side of Newton Popperford, and a green settlement 1 boundary proposed on the western side of Newton Popperford. The challenge was, should we include all or some of that green block? The issue is actually that the centre of Newton Popperford lies quite markedly to the east side of the village. And that's been referred to in a number of recent appeal cases. So 23607 PIP was a application in principle for a site outside the built-up area boundary as defined in the village's plan 2018. It was said to be poorly located and divorced from services and excessive distance from the centre of the village. It was not a sustainable location. That conclusion actually was East Devon's own officers, signed by our own Ed Freeman. Also 22779 PIP, another appeal decision. The inspector concluded the location was outside the built-up area boundary and it was fairly remote from a range of local facilities. The National Design Guide defines a walkable distance of 800 metres. The issue is that we have inconsistency, we have for consistency purposes included Newt 04 and 05 in the built-up area boundary proposal. Now that works because if either of those go forward for development, then contingent on the footpath being put in place, they become accessible. If that footpath connection does not get put in place, then they do not become accessible. So if we then expand the boundary beyond that, then we take the risk of including other sites irrespective of whether that footpath gets put in place. So I would really ask members and Mr. Freeman as well, when this decision comes back to committee, I believe on the 11th of December, to bear that in mind. Where is the centre of the village? What happens if that footpath isn't put in place in respect of other potential developments? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burrett. And I'm sure officers will make a note of that for the committee report on the 11th, won't you, Ed?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us then to agenda item 3, the Local Development Scheme and Local Plan Regulation 19 consultation. Mr. Freeman, a report at record speed, please.
Thank you, Chair. So members will have received some of these reports on local development schemes in the past. Hopefully you're familiar with the format of this. We need to publish a local development scheme every year. So this is an updated local development scheme that is designed to reflect the current position in terms of plan making in the district. So the real change really, I suppose, from the previous iteration is what's been mentioned in previous reports about breaking down the Regulation 19 consultation into 2 phases effectively. So we'll have, the intention is to have a first phase of Reg 19 consultation starting in January. This is assuming that the NPPF doesn't come out at a time scale and give us transition arrangements that mean we need to publish it before then, in which case I hope we'll be in a position to do that, having brought the plan through at your next meeting on the 11th of December, to leave us in a position to launch the consultation earlier if we need to, but in an ideal world I think we would leave it to mid-January so we're not clashing with Christmas and New Year in terms of the consultation period, and also to give us a bit more time to do some tweaks and refinement in terms of wording, formatting and those sorts of things over the intervening couple of weeks. And then we would have a second phase Regulation 19 consultation focused on the work we're doing in terms of master planning the second new community and some of the supporting evidence for that, particularly in terms of this greater exeter transport study that's underway, so that we can have a second phase of consultation in the spring, probably May next year, and then submit the plan following that consultation in the autumn for examination in either tail end of 25 into 26. So really, that just sets that out in this formal document that we're required to publish under the legislation called a Local Development Scheme. But hopefully that ties in with members' understanding of the position from previous reports. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Any questions from outside committee? Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. Just trying to get a bit of clarification. So we just need to be in consultation on the end of the month after the thing. And it's okay to have a second consultation. We don't have to have the final consultation at that point. We definitely got all that cleared up.
Yes and yes.
Right.
Is the answer substantially more complicated, or is it yes and yes?
Can be.
I'm not sure it is, actually, but Mr. Freeman.
Just to slightly clarify, in the sense that we are aligned with the draft NPPF that the government consulted on, which set out transitional arrangements that gave us 1 month from publication of the NPPF to get into the Regulation 19 stage of plan production. Obviously, when they published the NPPF, we don't know for certain whether or not those transitional arrangements will be as they consulted on. So there is some risk there. But in terms of your sort of second question, there is no reason why the Regulation 19 stage of production of a local plan has to be a single consultation. You can have more than one. But obviously, what we don't know is when they publish the NPPF, whether or not the transitional arrangements are different. So that 1 month period might be longer, fingers crossed, or it might not be there at all. Alternatively, they may also put a time frame on the Regulation 19 stage. So we need to be mindful of that. But as things stand, we are aligned with what the government consulted on earlier in the year. Sorry, that was substantially longer, but hopefully it's useful.
Quickly, please, Councillor Faithful.
Well, do we know of other councils in a similar situation if we need to sort of argue our case at all?
Exeter.
I mean, anywhere across the country as well? Is it a bigger group, or LGA or things like that?
Councillor Howell reports there's 16 or so across the country. We will not be unique. Okay. Councillor Collins.
Thank you. Will there be any public exhibitions of these plans at all, or public meetings in any towns, major towns or anything?
Wasn't envisaging having face-to-face consultations in the sense of sort of meetings in sessions in village halls and public places. This is a slightly different consultation, I would argue, to the Regulation 18 consultations we've had, where we've been presenting proposals and options and seeking views on those to inform plan production and discussion. The Regulation 19 consultation should be the council saying, this is our plan. We've heard what's been said in the previous consultations. We've debated that extensively through these meetings. And this is the Regulation 19 plan that we are proposing to submit for examination. What are your views on that plan? And those views can then take the form of potential objections to the plan, which should be heard through the examination process by the planning inspector, or they might just be comments on the plan for noting. But there shouldn't be necessarily any expectation that those comments are going to lead to major changes to the plan. The plan is the plan as the council envisages it to be moving forwards. So the consultation would be largely focused on the commonplace software online. We're developing a communications strategy based around engagement through commonplace, social media, a series of press releases during the consultation to highlight it to residents and other stakeholders. But I think because of the nature of this consultation, I don't think it's appropriate necessarily to have sort of workshop sessions in village halls and things, because it's not that kind of it's not as interactive, shall we say, in terms of the consultation. If it helps, I should have mentioned appended to the report is a sort of one-page summary of sort of the key messaging that we see being relevant to this consultation, which is about sort of telling the story of the local plan and emphasising messages about you've told us this is what we've done in response, or we're unable to do what you want because of housing targets set by governments, the legislation, etc., and trying to explain those things and tell the story of the local plan rather than so much being we need your views to inform its production. Hopefully that helps.
Councillor Collins?
In Honiton, we've got Honey 18, which has been put in very late, and that people in the town don't know about it. Also, the town council have never been consulted on it. I feel it's wrong to have a plan slipping in without consultation. Thank you.
So we've had that discussion at the last meeting. There will be the opportunity for committee to consider the comments on Honey 18, assuming everything goes as we expect it to. That's one of the opportunities that is opened up by this second Regulation 19 consultation. Am I correct, Mr. Freeman?
Yes, that's right. So the plan would come back to the committee to consider those comments. It's also a two-phased consultation. So while, as I say, not envisage making changes to the plan necessarily, there would be the opportunity to do so to some extent in terms of the second round of consultation. I take the point that Honey 18 hasn't been consulted on previously, but there will be the opportunity for Honiton Town Council and Honiton residents to comment through this process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Councillors Young, then Bailey.
Sorry. In January, we'll have got to Regulation 19, and then there is going to be, I don't think we can have anything set in stone at the moment because we don't know what the government policy is going to be. But in theory, it should be a 6-week public consultation of Regulation 19. So you have now, because we've been looking at it piecemeal, it would be really good just to go through it all and see how it runs, because there might be anomalies when you start reading it through. So then it will come back to this committee with any with spelling mistakes, etc., and commas and minor changes. I imagine would come through after that 6-week period. Then it goes to the inspector. Then it will come back from the inspector with possibly more changes, and then we will then have to debate that. That's the normal process, I believe.
I think there was a question in there. Mr. Freeman?
I'll
Is
take
Jeff's summary correct?
I'll take the question. Is that the process? Largely, yes. What I would say is I'm hoping we're not sending out to consultation with typos and spelling mistakes and things in it. I hope to get those resolved before it goes out. The intention is to bring the plan to the December 11th meeting, so you will have everything there to go through, as you say. I'll be seeking delegated authority, though, through the chair at that time to make minor changes in terms of typos and wording and things, so that what goes out is a clean document. I think the only other point I'd make in terms of the process is that it will come back to the committee, so you get a chance to consider the consultation responses. But before it's submitted to the inspector for examination, it needs to go to council as well. So it's not just this committee that sign it off, it's council. And then when it comes back, likewise, it would come to this committee to review the inspector's reports and findings, and then make a recommendation to council, who would be the ones that would need to adopt the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Bailey.
I can understand, thank you, why we may not want to go out to consultation over Christmas, but we have gone out to consultation over Christmas before, because we did it in December 22. And if we're signing off the committee draft local plan, subject to a delegation to Ed to make any minor amendments, it seems to me that there's a potential risk that if the government I've no idea, but say the government new MPPF came in early January, and at that point they made provision for all those local authorities at Regulation 19 consultation. We are not at Regulation 19 consultation until the very point at which we launch our consultation. So to me, it seems a little bit risky to delay, to hold back, and could we not go out to consultation, maybe a longer than 6-week consultation? Because at least then we've got the Regulation 19 consultation kind of in the bag. I'm just not sure about holding. I could understand if it wasn't ready and then we delay our 11th of December meeting. But if we're having the meeting on the 11th of December, we've signed it all off. Why would we not go out to consultation, albeit a longer consultation, to take into account the Christmas period?
It's your plan.
No, it's the council's plan. It's an option. I was hoping that we would have a bit more time after the 11th of December to refine things like formatting and proofreading and those sorts of things. And also in terms of setting up the consultation on commonplace and producing sort of press releases. We're trying to produce a information video as well for the launch of the consultation, which sort of explains the process of production of the local plan in a brief animated video that we can put online and social media as well. So those things take time. So in terms of all of that being ready to launch before Christmas would be very challenging, if not impossible. The plan itself, we would certainly have a version that could go live before Christmas if we needed it to. But in terms of having the full launch of the consultation and everything ready to launch that properly would be very challenging. There is a risk, but I would hope that the government are not going to just completely eliminate the transitional arrangements completely. I'm hoping that it's more likely to be extended than shortened, because my sense is most of the comments were that just giving a month is way too short. Our comments were, for example. So I would be very disappointed if they went from a month transition arrangement to no transition arrangement, or an even shorter one. But ultimately, in members' hands, if you would rather get the consultation running before Christmas, but accept that some of those things in terms of press releases and how it's set up as a consultation are not quite there and follow on, that there is that option. We did consult Reg 18 before Christmas, but I remember we got quite a lot of criticism for running a consultation over Christmas and New Year. So my thinking was it would be best avoided if we didn't have to. And my reading of the situation is we don't have to as things stand.
How early, thank you, Ed. How early in January would it be launched?
I think our current thinking is mid-January, so around the 15th. Again, this all depends on when the NPPF comes out. I think our expectation, perhaps cynically, is that it might come out on the last day of Parliament before they break up for Christmas, so the 20th of December. And then we would have potentially a month from there under what they published as transition arrangements, possibly longer. If it is only a month, then I would certainly be aiming for mid-January. If it was a longer period and suddenly the transition arrangements were 3 months or 6 months, then I would be thinking in terms of bringing the absolute final version once we've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's back to you in a meeting, and then launching from then, because the pressures would be slightly off in terms of timescales. So I think there needs to be some flexibility there. We're currently drafting the report that will come to you on December the 11th, and trying to craft some words around delegated powers to myself and the chair to be able to launch the consultation earlier if we need to, or hold it back if we have got the time to do so, depending on what the government do with the NPPF.
Thank you.
Councillor Young, is it quick? And a question this time?
Yeah. It's not a question, but it's just acknowledging what Ed was saying, that we did have criticism last time, having a consultation over Christmas. I remember the comments. Now, typical council putting a consultation out just before Christmas. It's not the best Christmas present we can give our residents. The other thought is we've got the draft that will be in the agenda for the 11th of December, and people who are very keen to study the whole that whole draft will be picking up the same points that hopefully will be picked up before it goes, the final version goes through.
Okay, thank you very much, members, for that set of questions. I'm going to move from the chair the recommendations as they're written. I don't think I've heard any issues that would make me think those have got to be changed. So that proposal stands. Does anybody wish to make any comments? No? Okay, in which case then we'll go to a vote. All those in favour of the recommendations as written? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Agenda item 4, the River Axe Special Area of Conservation and Local Nutrient Fund Round 2 Award. Mr. Freeman, some good news for this committee for a change.
Yes, yes, very good news. I think members will be aware of the issues in the River Axe catchment and the impact on the Special Area of Conservation and SSSI there of phosphates discharge from developments in that area, which has really led to us not being able to grant development in the River Axe for residential development for probably a good 18 months, 2 years now. So we are the lead authority on dealing with this because the catchment extends into Somerset and into a very small part of Dorset. And we made a bid to the Local Nutrient Mitigation Fund round 2 in April of this year. And pleased to say that's been successful, and we've been awarded over £4 million of funding towards delivering mitigation. And that also comes with some capacity support fund money of just under 200,000 as well, on top of 100,000 that we've already got for a nutrient support fund as well. So it leaves us in a good position to deliver the mitigation strategy. I'm not going to go into details of the mitigation strategy itself, not least because I don't fully understand it, and rely on support from our district ecologist who wrote the bid and obviously is going to have to play a key role in taking all of this forward. The report was drafted on the basis of the recommendations being endorsement and support for recommendations that were going to Cabinet, but because this part of the agenda was deferred, they've obviously already been to Cabinet earlier in the week, and I understand that all those recommendations were supported by Cabinet. So really the report at this stage is just for members to note the good news in terms of the funding that we have, the progress we're making in terms of delivering mitigation in that area. But there's a huge amount of work to do in terms of actually bringing that to fruition. Thank you very much.
Sorry, apologies, Chair. I should have dealt with it just now. So Councillor Bailey, I'm content, doesn't have a DPI. It's a high-level report, and the matter at hand does not relate to her, any pecuniary interest that she may today or Monday have. So we're content with that.
Okay, thank you very much. So to be clear, Ed, you're just asking us to note this report?
That's right, Chair. I don't think it makes sense for the committee to make recommendations to Cabinet retrospectively. So I would suggest the committee just notes the recommendations and the information in the report.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions before I so move? No? Okay, in which case I move that committee notes the report. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Okay, I think that's possibly the quickest report we've ever considered, SPC, isn't it?
Don't get good news often.
We don't get good news, and we've done it in about 3 minutes. Agenda item 5 then, the housing, back to the regular schedule of bad news, the housing monitoring update to year ending 31st of March 2024. Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. So like the LDS, I hope the members are familiar with the format of this report and the need to do housing monitoring reports on an annual basis that tell us our 5-year housing and supply position. which then has to be used to inform decision making in the district. Members will be aware that we didn't have a 5-year housing land supply this time last year. Unfortunately, we still don't have a 5-year housing land supply. In fact, it's declined further to 4.15 years, as you'll see from table 3 in the report. And I think that reflects sort of lower levels of both delivery in the district in that year, and lower levels in terms of consents being granted and coming forward in that period as well. I think it aligns with a sort of period of uncertainty nationally, I would say, in terms of the planning position, planning policy with the change of government, and to some extent the economic position as well. So I don't think we're alone in this position. The other thing to say, I suppose, is that as things stand, we're still using the NPPF that was published in December 23. Yeah. And so we're only required technically to have a 4-year housing land supply position. So technically we have, for decision-making purposes, an adequate supply. But I would remind members that in terms of the local plan, we need to get to the position of a 5-year housing land supply at the point of adoption. And so I wouldn't take too much comfort in the 4-year housing land supply position, not least because it's almost certainly going to be withdrawn when the new NPPF comes out. The requirement will be 5 years. But we certainly, either way, need to bolster our housing land supply position as we move forward towards submission of the local plan and then its examination, so that we put ourselves in a stronger position as possible in terms of having a 5-year housing land supply at the point of adoption. So technically we don't need to apply the tilted balance, which is a formal process set out in the NPPF about the balance to be given to housing land supply position in relation to other material considerations, but we do ourselves as an authority need to be mindful of the need to bolster our housing land supply position, notwithstanding that, and try and turn this around and get this heading back up towards 5 years and beyond, I would suggest, to give ourselves some comfort through the examination process. There's obviously a lot of technical detail in the covering report, and particularly in the appendix. Happy to take any questions on that, but those are the headlines. In terms of the recommendations, members are asked to note the position is set out in the report, and if I recall that the report and the appendix be published on our website and used to inform decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. The table at paragraph 7.4 is particularly terrifying. Questions, members? Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. So, to build up this 5-year housing land supply, do the new sites for our new local plan apply to the old local plan? How does that work? Basically, how do we get those numbers up?
By granting planning permission. In effect, allocations in a plan are not sufficient in themselves, so we can't count those in our 5-year housing land supply position. For decision-making purposes, we need consents, in effect. I think, obviously, as we've been through the sites, through the site allocation process, members will be aware that a number of sites we've seen plans of, either indicative plans through pre-application discussions or plans that are in train through the system, either as outline applications or in some cases full applications. I hope the fact that those sites are now going into Regulation 19 planners allocations will give perhaps comfort to planning committee in terms of potentially granting consents for them in advance of the adoption of the local plan, which I would suggest is something we should be seriously entertaining as a way of helping to address our housing land supply position in a manner that aligns with the strategy that's emerging. And I think that's probably the most likely means of bolstering our supply position. And then once they've got consent, we can work with the developer to understand the trajectory of delivery and factor those into our calculations. and bolster the position that way.
Just sort of looking forward, I mean, how should we have been reviewing our local plan more regularly to keep those numbers up to date in the local plan process rather than just giving planning permission just to get the numbers up?
I think I'd be right in saying the issue there was that GESP was happening and then it wasn't. Is that right, Mr. Freeman?
Yes, there's certainly an element of that. Obviously, we were moving forward with the GESP, well ahead of the local plan, which would have, had it been adopted, obviously then given comfort for those large major sites. That was dealing with sites of sort of 500 homes or more, but we would potentially have been further progressed in terms of those sites, in terms of applications then coming in with the comfort of an allocation through the GESP to then be in a position of having consents granted for some of those to factor into this process. Aside from that, I think that's really the only reason we didn't start work on the local plan earlier, because obviously that would have been a significant component of the local plan, and then the local plan itself would have been more focused on smaller scale developments around the communities. So that has delayed the allocation of sites, which hasn't helped the position. I mean, the review process is every 5 years. We did the review at 5 years and concluded we needed to produce a local plan, and have worked as fast as we can since then on that process. But yes, perhaps something we need to think about in the future in terms of how we make sure at the end of a sort of, well, not the end of a plan period, but that we're in a position to ensure that we maintain our 5-year housing supply more readily during the plan period, rather than continually get into the position whereby we're running short of supply during the plan period, and then having that gap while we review the plan. But I would say that's not uncommon. I think most authorities have that issue. But I think it comes back to bolstering our supply position, and rather than just getting to 5 years or just above 5 years, it would be nice to get to a position where we've got 6 years or 7 years supply and a bit of headroom in the process ultimately.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. So we're starting the next plan, what, May next year then? To be clear, for the benefit of anyone watching, that's a joke. Councillor, coming into committee then, Councillor Young, then Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Mr. Freeman here. There's been quite a few substantial, large outlines that have gone through in the last year for Cranbrook and the West End. They will be coming through, hopefully, early part of next year. But that doesn't mean that everything is going to be solved by those coming through, I believe, because they might take more than 5 years to develop out. So although we might have 1,500, 2,000 more houses with approved planning application, that doesn't mean we add 2,000 because they're not going to be built in that 5-year period. Is that right?
Spot on. Yes. Yeah, we can only count them within the 5 years once they've got consent, and will be delivered in that 5-year period. So yeah, you end up granting consent for an awful lot more homes ultimately, but than is needed to make up your 5 years. But equally, you need to think this is a rolling 5 years. So in a year's time, and in future years, those homes that we will hopefully be granting detailed consent for next year at Cranbrook will count in our supply as we move forward. So it's important to think beyond the 5 years as well.
Yeah, well, one of the issues I think most districts have got is that they perceive that there's not going to be enough builders, there's not going to be enough bricks, there's not going to be enough wood, etc., etc. So then, no, there's not going to be a magic, oh, now we've got 3,000, they're all going to be built and they're all going to be sold within the next 5 years. It does take time for them to filter through, and there's also the supply and demand of
Is
need-
there a question here
yeah,
that
you
isn't
need
just,
you
am I
need-
right?
No, am I right in assuming that? No, it's now part of the problem is the supply and demand of customers coming to buy the houses.
The market will only absorb so much, yes. I think the problem Mr. Freeman's outlined is that actually we don't have necessarily the sites coming forward for consent at the moment.
I think the issue is we haven't had. I'm hoping that by having a Regulation 19 plan out with agreed allocations, that we've seen some of those sites coming forward. Hopefully, more of them will, and we can start to bring those through the process and bolster our supply position. But Councillor Young's right. There are a huge number of other issues at play here, many of which are outside of our control. So we can only do what we can do, which is grant consents and bolster the supply of consented housing sites.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Any further questions that don't end with "Am I right"? Councillor Howe.
Am I wrong? First question, obviously, from Mr. Freeman. How many applications have we currently got sitting? Housing applications, ideally, but any applications, with our planning teams at present?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I can readily find out and let you know. I do have that data. I think my perception is not that many, really. There are certainly some in the system, but not as many as I would like to see at this point in time.
Following on, obviously, and what's the average length of time are those applications taking to get through our planning system?
Well, it varies because we're talking about housing sites that are all subject to Section 106 agreements that can take time on both sides. So it's quite variable.
This could go on for quite a while. Yeah, and obviously, you know the emphasis of where I'm coming from. Are we, the royal we, and not because of any reason, we've had staffing shortages and everything else, are we part of that problem in delays in decision making and the speed throughput of our planning process, including legal? You know, no picking of any phraseology here, but including legal. That we should be looking at to try and prioritise schemes that will come forward within the 5 years that we need to achieve, if you get my meaning. Early adopters, quick, fast track certain applications that will deliver within 3 years, ideally, obviously, to get them up and built, isn't it? Smaller schemes, etc. And following that, can we amend the timescales in our planning applications for people that want to push their application through?
Short version.
I think we're in quite a good position, really, in terms of staffing and resources. We did have quite a large number of vacancies a year or so ago, which it was causing some delays in the system. We've been successful in recruiting to a lot of those vacancies. Unfortunately, I subsequently got one other key vacancy, which is the team leader for the Western team, which we're working on. But other than that, there are no vacancies in terms of planning officer positions in the team at the moment. So I think we're in a good position, and obviously the emphasis is going to have to be on trying to move forward housing sites as quickly as we can and move them through the process. There were a number of sites that were sort of held up because of uncertainty over some of this position. The 4-year housing land supply really didn't help us in terms of understanding the government policy and position and the weight that should be attached to housing land supply positions versus other issues. And then there are a number of sites that obviously progressing through the local plan process where lack of certainty, there were departures from the local plan. There hadn't been identified as allocations in the new local plan, so they were sort of in a no man's land of, what do we do with these sites? We're working through them. A couple of them came to the last planning committee meeting, you'll be aware, one at Limpston and one at Woodbury. So we're working through that, and I think I hope the Regulation 19 plan going out to consultation shortly will give some clarity in terms of the council's position in terms of those allocations and moving them forward. I guess the other thing to say in terms of resources is in terms of legal, where there isn't capacity in the legal team to do the Section 106 agreement, they are sent out to solicitors at the expense of the developer, I should point out. So there's no reason why that should cause delay in terms of the process, but obviously negotiating a legal agreement is not necessarily a quick process on either side, whether it's us or the developer, and often involves various parties, not just the developer, but all the landowners as well. So those processes can unfortunately take time, even if all parties are keen to move things forward as quickly as possible. But we will obviously do our best to move forward the housing sites and move them through the system as quickly as possible to help to address this situation.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. You did miss one of Councillor Howe's questions. Can we put a shorter time limit than 3 years for implementing permissions to encourage them to come forward faster?
Well, I mean, the answer is we can do. We have the freedom under the legislation to do that. It's a weighing up the benefits of that in terms of potentially incentivising early delivery of a scheme versus the consequence of then them running out of time to implement it and then having to come in again. So I think what we're tending to do is not necessarily reduce the period for compliance, but trying to get commitments through the application process from developers to say this is our intention, this is our intended trajectory for delivery of sites, so that we have some understanding of what their intentions are. Reducing the time period is a sort of double-edged sword. It can incentivise early delivery, but equally, if for reasons outside of their control that doesn't happen, you're then in a position where it then drops out of your 5-year housing land supply earlier than it might otherwise, because it's no longer got consent, and then they've got to come in again. So it's a mixed blessing. But yes, we obviously need to consider that on an application by application basis, I think.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. I see no further questions. So I'm going to move the recommendations as written, plus an extra one that the planning committee have sight of this and are reminded of the importance of granting some consents so we get to the 5-year housing land supply at the point of adoption that we need for the local plan. If you're happy with that, Mr. Freeman.
Just to clarify, do you envisage the actual report being taken to planning committee as well? Or what we usually do is just when the issue of 5-year housing land supply is relevant, we would make reference to it in the report on the individual application to planning committee and insert a hyperlink so that they have direct access to it.
So I would like to see this paper go to planning committee. Watching some decisions recently, I've been slightly concerned that planning committee has forgotten, and the significance of us not getting to that 5-year housing land supply is such that I think they ought to be reminded. Councillor Bailey.
Just a quick question. I had a feeling that our 5-year land supply, at what is it at the point at which we go to examination that we have to have a 5-year land supply?
We have to be able to show that we will have a 5-year housing land supply at the point of adoption, but we have to be able to show that when we go in for examination. Mr. Freeman's nodding. Does that make sense?
Yes. And do we think we're going to be able to do that, bearing in mind where we are at the minute?
My impression that I've been given by officers is that it will be challenging. Is that right, Mr. Freeman?
That's the exact word I was going to use, yes, Chair. Yes, challenging but not impossible. I think we can get to that position, but we do need to grant some consents. We also need to further explore the option of what's called a stepped trajectory, if I can get the words out, which I think we've touched on before, whereby we're basically saying that because of the scale of some of our developments, it will take time for them to be unlocked in terms of getting into sites, particularly things like the new community, second new community, and therefore our trajectories might not be an even level of delivery across the planned period. It might be a stepped arrangement, which might make it easier for us to demonstrate an adequate supply position if we're using those arguments, but they themselves come with risks, but they have been accepted elsewhere at examinations. So we need to explore those options as we move forward and keep the situation under review, because obviously it's changing on a probably monthly basis as consents are granted and time moves on in terms of what's in our 5-year housing land supply. So, but yeah, I'm optimistic we can.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Any further points from members before we go to a vote? No? Okay, in which case the recommendations are as in the report, plus that it's brought to the attention of Planning Committee. All those in favour, please. That's carried unanimously. Okay, which brings us then to the final item for last week's agenda, agenda item 6, the infrastructure funding statement. Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. So, again, strangely, we've got 3 things on this agenda that are annual reports that we bring through. In this case, the infrastructure funding statement, albeit I think I only brought the previous one a couple of months ago because of lack of resources in the planning obligations team. It's great how things have turned around in that we've now got adequate resource in the team to produce this one, not just on time, but also in an entirely new format and style, which hopefully makes it much easier to read and understand, and for the key points to stand out in the document. So I hope, appreciate members' comments on the formatting and whether members feel this is an appropriate way to present the information moving forward. But essentially, this is a factual summary of SIL receipts and spend, and Section 106 receipts and spend across the year, and obviously documents the proportion of neighbourhood SIL going to each of the parishes as well. So hopefully a useful summary. It's a requirement of the legislation that we publish this before the end of the year. So the recommendation is for members to note the contents of the report and requirements for the annual infrastructure funding statement and approve the submission and publication of it on our website. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Any questions about the report itself rather than the broader SIL environment, which I'd prefer if we could deal with outside committee, just to get the meeting over with? Councillor Young, is it relevant to the funding statement? And does it end with "am I right"?
No. Starts with it.
Right. First of all, in 3.2, it lists emergency service facilities. I presume that is including hospitals, doctor surgeries, and we're getting a lot of criticism that we're not providing dentists or dentist premises. Would that be covered? And also in transport, that covers roads and potholes and possibly bus services, train services. Now, the headings are very one word, so I just wonder if they can be expanded.
They can be. I mean, I think it's something more that we need to look at through the infrastructure delivery plan rather than the funding statement. When we look at infrastructure that's required moving forward and how we do that, and there is an issue that's been raised by infrastructure providers in terms of what we're funding through SIL and what we're funding through Section 106, and whether or not we could look at that, because a lot of them I think would rather be funded through Section 106 and have that direct link to a planning permission rather than have to bid through the SIL process. But equally, I can't help thinking their judgment of us in terms of that is tarred by the fact we haven't run a SIL spend process for a number of years because of resourcing issues, and once we've got that process right, they might actually be more accepting of that route and see that it has some benefits for them as well. But yeah, I mean, in terms of those, I mean, I would say certainly GPs and hospital facilities, yeah, within the healthcare facilities bracket, emergency services, I would see more as police and fire in this circumstance. Transport, I wouldn't see that as including road repairs. That's a statutory requirement of Devon County Council as the highway authority, more about funding public transport, walking and cycling routes, and things like that that support our strategy about sustainable growth and sustainable development and transport. But I think it's more something we need to look at through the infrastructure delivery plan and potentially moving forward in terms of reviewing our SIL charging schedule and things like that, which we'll need to follow on from the local plan.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Perhaps someone should remind the County Council that potholes are their statutory responsibility. Councillor Fernley.
Thank you. You may think this is a slightly strange query, but the use of red in the document is usually a warning sign. So on your, say, page 4, you've got this big red block and it says 300,000 in like the biggest letters it possibly can. And it's like a warning. So it's like, and all the way through, there's red been used, and it makes me feel uncomfortable reading it.
It is our corporate colours, of course, Councillor Fernley.
Yeah, but
oh no, I agree with you. It's a stark contrast. I quite like it, to be honest. But
I just think we're trying to promote what we're doing, then it's a good thing. Yeah, I think you're making it like it's a warning, like there's something wrong. But, you know, everyone might not agree with that, but that's my opinion.
it's not a totally unreasonable point.
It's the wrong
We'll take that away and reflect, I think, is the response there. We'll take that away and reflect. And we're not going to make it pink, because that's not our corporate colour, Jeff.
We could have made it yellow.
Any further questions on this report? No? Okay. In which case, I will move the recommendations as set out. All those in favour, please. Okay, thank you very much, members. And can we send our thanks to the planning obligations team and indeed the comms team for A, the paper, B, their work, and C, it being nicely jazzed up for us. Okay, that brings us to the end of the agenda for today then. If anybody does have any questions about planning obligations matters and specific projects and things, Jonathan is the person to ask, who might be at his desk, but who knows?
No, he's not in the building today, but
Okay.
he's available on email and telephone.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Bailey?
No, it's fine.
Okay, thank you very much, members. That brings us to the end of today's meeting.